Good Fach. The learning as a schus for Shleima Filan Chaya Basarach and for Meir Ben Cyril Perel. We're on Daf Chavtes Amid Beis by the two dots, 6 lines down from the top. Amr Rishim Ben Lakish Mishum Levi Saba. Eine l'shchita ela b'soif. A shchita is not it's not a complete product until you get to the end. That means if you're if you're talking about, let's say, a behema, yeah, when you finish both simonim or roiv of the second simon, and that's when it's a shchita. Before that, it's not a shchita. Rabbi Yochanan says no. The shchita is ongoing from the beginning. It's a shchita at the beginning, and then it continues, and eventually it ends. But even the beginning is part of the shchita. And the Gemara is going to go through at great length what the nafkaminas are. What are the what are the consequences of these two ways of looking at shchita? Is shchita one long ongoing process, or is shchita something that when you finish the shchita, then that makes it that it's a shchita, but before that you're just hacking away at the animal? Amar Rava, hakol moedim heicha deshachat simen echad, oived kechavim. If a oived kechavim cut the first simen of a behema, the simen echad Yisrael, and then the yid cut the second simen, shei psula. We're not going to say that because ein l'shchita el l'b'saif, so we'll say that who cares that a guy did the first siman, because it's only a conclusion, it's only a shchita at the end that part of you did. So why not? What the Ovid Kechavim did, doing even one siman, even according to the man Amr who says ein l'shchita el l'b'saif, but cutting one siman, even if they go ahead cut one siman and then stopped, the animal would be a treifa. It would not be able to be shechted anymore. So you can't say he did nothing because he did something of significant consequence. He made the animal to a treifa unless it turns out to be a kosher shchita. So therefore we would say this is not going to be a kosher shchita because a guy did a significant part of it, even if you hold ein l'shchita ela b'sayf. Similarly, another thing, it means even if you have a oilas oif, where we said a chatas oif, you only do one siman, oilas oif you do two siman. Hecha de malik siman echad lamata, the siman echad lamayla. So the oilas oif is supposed to be done lamayla. The chatas oif is supposed to be done lamata. Meaning there was a chut hasikra, there was a red string that went around the middle of the mizbeach, and like we said, by the behemoths, the chatas had to be done on the top, but by a oif, the malika and the zrikas of the oila had to be done lamaila, and of the chatas had to be lamat. So if someone was doing bringing an oila saif, and he did the malika, and he divided up the malika. He pushed his fingernail through siman echad lamata. He did the first siman on the bottom, which was not where it was supposed to be, the siman echad lamayla. But then he did the second half, the end, the conclusion of the malika. He did on top. Psula, according to everyone, even according to the mandamar of ein l'shchita el l'b'saif, and he did the concluding part of malika properly, lamayla. But it's still going to be possible. Because, just like we said before, or similar type of svara, over here we're going to say, had it been a chatas, all you have to do is one siman. You finished one siman lamata. So that for legabe chatas oif is in and of itself a sufficient avoida. So even though by your oil side you need two simanim, but you're not going to say that according to Manda Amar, that doing the first part of the Oilas Oif Lamata is inconsequential. Because had it been a Chatas Oif, it would have been a consequential act, and therefore everyone would agree in that case that it's going to be puzzle, since part of it, a substantial part of it was done improperly Lamata, even if you hold Ein L'Shchita El L'B'Saif. So we've knocked off a couple of possibilities of what the nafkamina is, what the consequence is of whether you say yesh lo schita mitchila v'atzayif or ein lo schita mitchila v'atzayif. Lo nechliku el going to shochat siman echad b'chutz v'siman echad b'fnei. You shechted, someone was shechting a behemoth for a carbon. The shechita has to be done inside of the Beis Hamikdash. But rather than doing it properly, the whole thing, shechting it in the Beis Hamikdash, he shechted siman echad b'chutz, he shechted one outside of the Beis Hamikdash, siman echad b'fnim, and one he did properly inside. So the question is he going to be chayiv for doing a shechita b'chutz? According to him, you're going to be chayiv for doing a shechita improperly. Over here, it sort of bears the svara is going the other direction over here, right? We were talking over there about psul. So saying for psul, the first siman is chashav enough. It's going to always, for the reasons we gave before, in the case we gave before, the first action was sufficient to be treated even according to Mandama in Litchil. Over here, we're talking about whether someone could be chayiv for doing something improper with the first half, but he's chayiv for being over on shchutei chutz. So according to Mandama Yeshu shchita mitchil v'atzayif mechayiv, his action of doing a shchita b'chutz, even though he didn't complete the shchita, is enough to be mechayiv. L'mandama in l'shchita l'b'tzayif loy mechayiv. He's not going to be chayiv because the shchita was not complete. Doing a partial shchita outside is not enough to be mechayiv. Amle Rabbi Bashimi, Ma'alei Ham Amar Hachi. My Rebbe did not say like this. He did not agree. Meaning, he said that this is not going to be the din. Uman Rabbi Yosef. Who is this? Rebbe of mine, Rabbi Yosef. What does he say? Heicha the shachet ech shemen echad b'chutz v'semen echad b'fnim nami pasul. What he means to say is it's going to be possible. It's going to be chayiv, even though he said a lashon apostle. It's not really precisely the right lashon, but it means he's saying even if you hold eina l'shchita el b'tzayif, you're going to be chayiv for doing the first siman b'chutz. Why? Because the same chazon, like we said before, shari asa b'ma'aseh chatas oif b'chutz. Because had it been a chatas oif, that would have been sufficient if he just did one siman. You only do one siman by a chatas oif. So he rejects this also as being the nafkamina. I should have noted that this discussion is all talking about where you're shechting a bird, an oif, which is really supposed to be malika. But even so, you could be chayiv. We have psukim that the Gemara has said before that you could be chayiv for shechting a oif bachutz, in spite of the fact that a oif can only be brought as a carbon with malika. But the Torah says that you be chayiv for shechting also. So in that case, he rejects that. So we're still back to what is an nafkamina whether you hold yesh mishchita mitchil v'atzayif or not. The only case is where he shechted part of the simanim bachutz, the gamru b'fnim, and then he didn't do the roif, so he didn't complete the shechita. The gamru b'fnim, and he finished it b'fnim. Since he started the shechita outside, even though he didn't complete even enough to be a full shechita of any kind, but if you hold yeshon shechita v'tchila, what he did was part of the shechita. But according to the mandam who says it's only l'psaif, then you're not going to be chayiv. Meaning, according to Shimon Lakish, Shimon Levi Saba, you would not be chayiv for this action of doing a partial shechita b'chutz. Motzei Reb Zera. Reb Zera asked the kasha on. So we've said this. This is the case in which you have it in nafkamina, where a person does a partial shechita b'chutz. Is that going to be enough to be mechayiv? According to the Amar of Rabbi Yochanan, who says yeshon shechita b'tchila v'atzayif, you're going to be chayiv. According to Rishon and Lakish, Mishum Levi Saba, you're not going to be chayiv. Motzei Reb Zera. Reb Zera asked on the Ma'anamba who says yeshon shechita b'tchila v'atzayif. Kol asukim b'para. whoever does part of the process of the paraduma, the paraduma is a kind of contemplated process. You have to be careful with the para. You can't do any work with it. You burn it. You take those ashes. You shecht it. I'm sorry. Then you burn it. You take those ashes and you mix it with the water. So a couple of rules about this. One is that whoever does the work of the paraduma becomes tamei. They and their begotten become tamei. And there's also a rule that as you do this work, you have to be careful not to do any other work at the same time. It's going to be a hesach hadas, and it will passel the paraduma. So Rezer asks, we say in I think it's a Mishnah, whoever is involved in doing the work of the para from any part of the avodah from the beginning to the end, his begada become tameh. And in addition, if he does any other work at the same time of doing the avodah of the paraduma, he'll passel the paradum. So iraba psul b'shchita, that the next few words are removed because of the hemshech of the Gemara later on. It's not really going to make sense if these words are included. You'll have a kasha, but we'll include them for them in the meantime. Irba psul b'shchitasa. If a psul happened in the shchita, Rashi said like it became an avela by the shchita. Bein koydem psula, bein la'acha psula, ein metam b'gadim. It's not going to be metam b'gadim. It doesn't make a difference whether he was working with this paraduma before the shchita went wrong or after he finished. He already made the mistake with the shchita and he made it to nevela. He did one of the chaylado or drisa or shtia, one of the problems that could passel is shchita. Since the shchita was not completed properly, it never became a paraduma, so he's not going to be metama his begadim as a paraduma. But if you finish the shchita and now you're taking the dam, and there's certain hazois that you do with the dam of the paraduma, then it's going to depend. Since you already had a shchita, so this is a paraduma. So now, if it becomes pasul, so from that point on, it can no longer be metama. It's only metama because it has a din as a valid paraduma. Once it's pasul, it's no longer metama. But prior to the psul, it's still able to be metama. So that's the difference between shchita and hazah. So now we're finally getting to our point. Why did we say by shchita? So that's why we really have to take out these words, or else say that the words of what we said, you have to really say that was an explanation before, and not part of the brisa. So we're saying now, if you hold that yeshna shchita mitchil v'atzayif, like Rabbi Yochanan says, let's say even by shchita also, ira psul b'shchita kaidem psula mitam begadam la'acha psula ena mitam begadam. It should have the same nafkamina that before it became pasul, it's mitam, and after it became pasul, so it's no longer a shchita, and it shouldn't be mitam. Amarava, no, that's not a taina. We can't make the same taina that it should be mechulik before psul and after psul by shchita the same way it was by hazah. Because niskalkal shchita ka'amra, you're talking about where the shchita became pasul. Shari hasla the gloy bizlo afraid the lav shchita klau. If the shchita becomes pasul, so lemafreya, it was never a paraduma. If it's not a paraduma, it never had the power. Even if you hold yeshin l'shchita, even if it was a good shchita, it was part of the shchita before. But if it later became the shchita was pasul and it was not, you didn't complete the shchita, it never became a paraduma. So it wasn't able to be metama also paraduma. Even if you hold yeshin l'shchita mitchil v'atzayif, it was a shchita, but it wasn't a paraduma. The Mefarshim talk about how this works. It should anyway be an avela. So what does it make a difference whether you become tamei alts paraduma or tamei alts nevela? The way Rashi learns. But I think paraduma will be metama begadim even if he's not touching it. If he's using it with something else, it'll be metama whereas an avela won't. So Omar Rabbi, ikashli hakashli. So we answered this kasha from paraduma on Rabbi Yochanan. But Rava says I have a different kasha. L'mandam ein l'shchita ela b'seif. I'll ask on the other mandam, on Bishlakish Bishum Levi Saba. Liflig b'hechshera depara. Why are we talking? Why are we? He's asking a kasha on the same brisa that we just said from Para Aduma, but he's saying not from the case where it became possible, but let's say an afkamina where it became when we did a good Para Aduma, could go into shachtua betray gavri, where two people did the shchita. One person started the shchita and the second person completed it. The gavr kama loy metama. The Gavak Basar Matama. According to the Manda Amar, why do we have to say an afkamina in the Brisa and say by Hazah, by Shchita, it's always going to be, it's not, no one's going to become Tameh if it becomes possible by the Shchita. But by Hazah, it becomes possible in the middle. Before Hazah, before it became possible, it's Tameh. After the Psul, it's not Tameh. Why do we forget about Hazah? Let's say that where two people did the shchita of the paraduma, they will have an afkamina, where the first person to do the shchita will be tar. According to Manda Amar, so he didn't do anything. He didn't accomplish anything. But the Gavra Basa, the second person, will be tameh. Amar Rav Yosef, Trei Gavi b'chad zivcha ka'amrit. What are you trying to say? Two people do each part of a same shchita? Ba'minei dahudit. That can't be. We don't say such a shchita as ever kosher. The Tnina, Tizbach, that we had on the previous summon. Tizbach shelo yishnayim sheichtim zevach echad. We learn from Tizbach that two people cannot take part of the same shchita legabe kachim. Tizbachu shelo yei echad sheichet shnei zvachim. And then we learn out from the Mikra, the way it's read. It says shelo yei tizbachu, that one person should not shech two karbanos with one shchita. That from the ksiv that tells you to learn out both things both from the tizbach and the zochehu. That tizbachehu tells you not just that's what we know. The two people, he has to do it himself. The ksiv is that he should do it. Tizbachehu, he should do it and not someone else. Amalei Abaye. So l'chayra we see that the din is that you cannot have two people do one. So how could you suggest that should be what kind of kasha is this on Reish Lakish Mishum Lebi Sava? But we don't hold it to such a thing as two people doing a shrita one after the other, two people participating. Amalei Abaye lavitma Amar Rabbi Bachan Rabbi Yochanan Zudiv Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Stimo. This that we just said, that we quoted, that two people cannot collaborate to do a shchita, that's only according to Elazar of Shimon, who was the said stamis. That the Chum disagree, and they say two people can do one carbon. Elazar of Shimon Nami, and even according to Elazar of Shimon, who says two people can't do one carbon. I'll tell you another possibility. Liflig, let's make the nafkamina, going to shachat chav gaver b'shnei sudrim, where one person did the shchita of the paraduma, but he changed what he was wearing in the middle. The sudala kamaloi metama, according to the Manda Amar of ein l'shchita ela b'saif, only the thing he was wearing at the beginning of the shchita should not become tameh, because he wasn't wearing that during the shchita of the paraduma. It was only the beginning, which is not part of the shchita. It's only at the end. So the basa metama. So l'chayra. This is the l'chayra. Why won't we mechalik like this in the brayso? So why do we have to be mechalik with the case of psula by hazah? So the Gemara psula de para kamayri bechsher loy kamayri. So the Gemara at this point just says, no, you're suggesting that we should have been mechalik in the brayso instead of being mechalik between where it became possible by the shchita and possible by the hazah. Let's say it's possible by the shchita. Then it's not going to be an afkamina before and after. But if he does the behechsher and wears two separate things, that's where you can have an afkamina between the beginning and the end. Where it says we don't want to be mechalik in hechsher. Rashi says that's not a chiddush that we were interested in making. So Ella lemitats ela hachitarts. The Tana Bapara Psula Itztrich Leila Flugi. Lashmin Nafagav the Nifsula to tell you that even though it became possible, Miyu Kaidim Psula, Taras Para. It's coming to tell you, even though it became possible, before the psul, it has a din of a para. We were not interested in telling this din of yeshel mitchila vatzai for eina b'tchila vatzai. We just wanted to say the din of psulin that even if it becomes possible, it's still going to be considered to be from the beginning part of the. It's not, since the shchita was not completed behechsher, so it never was a shchita, and nobody is going to be chayiv for doing or they're not going to become tamei else doing a para betum. Motzei divaravim obemoyed l'shmoi pater shaloi l'shmoi chayiv. We say on there's a din, which is, not something we're necessarily familiar with, but the din is that if someone shechs the carbon Pesach while he has chametz in his house on Pesach, he's chayiv for a lav. There's a lav. You're not allowed to shech the carbon Pesach. Al chametz dam zivchi. You can't. And the pasuk says you can't be. I forgot what the pasuk is. Yeah. So we say you can't shech the chametz, you can't shech the carbon Pesach when you have chametz, but it has to still be a carbon Pesach. Meaning, certainly if you do it on Erev Pesach, that's going to be a classic chiyuv of this lav. On Erev Pesach, you still have chametz in your house, in addition to being over on Bal Yirah, Bal Motzei. He's also going to be, if he brings the carbon Pesach, he's going to be chayiv a separate lav for bringing the carbon Pesach with chametz. Gemara says, but on the Yom Tif, if he kept his carbon Pesach past that 14th day, and now it's during Yom Tif, and he brings the carbon Pesach on Yom Tif, l'shmoi, if he brings it as a carbon Pesach, then he's going to potter, because he's bringing it as a carbon Pesach, but it's possible as a carbon Pesach. He can't bring a carbon Pesach during after the Zman, so therefore he's going to be potter. He's not going to be chayiv for bringing a Pesach because it became possible. You bring a carbon, you can't be chayiv for bringing the carbon Pesach while you have chametz. But shaloi l'shmoi chayiv. If he brings a shaloi l'shmoi, then it converts into a shlomim, which is a valid carbon. Now it's still going to have the din that it's a Pesach because it was separated as a Pesach. We're talking about here at this point. We're talking about where he had brought a carbon Pesach and he lost it, and then he brought a different carbon and he had this one left over. So he brings it shaloi l'shmai. It doesn't lose its status as a Pesach, legabe the din of bringing a Pesach while he owns chametz, but it's still going to be a valid carbon because it converts into a shlam. Zet Gemara, v'avinam ba. Time of the shaloi l'shmai. The only reason why we're saying it becomes a shlam is because he had in mind that it should be a shlam, a stama. But if he brought it stam, potter, it would be potter because it would be possible already from bringing it. V'amai potter pesach v'shari ma'isa shana shlamamu. We know that a Pesach, when it's brought out of its time, becomes a shlam. So what do we say? Why do we say this also becomes a shlam? Shamina pesach shari ma'isa shana boya akira. So you see from that stam, it doesn't become a shlamim. He has to have in mind bedafka, it should become a shlamim, even though it's past the time of the carbon Pesach. In order to become a shlam, he has to have in mind bedafka should become a shlam. But we still haven't gotten to how this relates back to our original question of yeshel l'shchita mitchila v'tzayif or not. Baruch Chia Gamda. Nizruka v'pi chabura. Rav Chia Gamda says we heard from the chabura v'amru hacha v'amru hacha ma'eskinan. What is the case over here? Going to you bailim tmei mason. We're talking about a case with a bailim with tamei mace. So that's the reason why Eina Chanami, that someone who has stamazoi, he has a carbon Pesach and he brings it later, it will become maybe a shlomim. But over here we're talking about someone who was b'shas the beginning. It wasn't where he lost his original Pesach, but he was tamei tumas mace by the first on Yudalad Nisan. The nitchel Pesach Sheni, so his carbon Pesach is still valid to be brought on Pesach Sheni. The stama l'shmoikai. So in this case, Taka, if he would bring it on Yom Tov, if he just brings it Stam, we would assume he's still bringing it for Pesach Sheni. So he has to proactively have in mind that it should be a Pesach, it should be a Shlom in order to switch it. V'haihu de boyakira. That's in that case you need akira. Ha'achar leboyakira. But stam azayif were to bring stam if he had missed bringing it on Yudalid, not because it was tamei mace, but because he had lost it and he brought a different one, then you don't need akira. So we can understand why in this case where he had his carbon pesach that he's waiting to bring on Pesach Sheni, that was saying that it's going to automatically become, he's going to have to be nekaret to make it into a carbon Pesach, and to make it into a shlomim, but otherwise it's going to be potter. So bishlama yeshon shchita mitchila vatsoif. If the shchita begins at the beginning, if salem mitchila shchita, so you could say as soon as you start shechting it, so you made it a mum, so it's no longer able to be a carbon, but he was already shechting it. He was shechting his carbon pesach before it became possible. So that's why he's going to be chayiv for bringing this carbon pesach b'mayid while he has chametz in his possession. Eli Amrit ain't l'shchita el b'sayf. You say the shchita only is effective b'sayf. Keeping the shachar beipurt. As soon as he does a little bit of a shchita, itchil pesach. At that point, it's possible. It can no longer be a pesach. And idach ki kashachet shlomim kashachet. And then when he actually is shechting it, when he finishes at the end, at that point it's no longer able to be a pesach. So what he's shechting is a pesach, is a shlomim, and he should be chayiv. He should be chayiv on it. So but we said that it's not going to be chayiv. Why isn't he going to be chayiv when he brings on mayid this carbon, since he pasaled it from being a carbon pesach with the beginning of the shchita, and that was not the shchita yet. At the end, when he does the shchita, it's a valid shlomim because it's pasaled from being a pesach, and now it's being brought as a shlom. So he's bringing his carbon pesach as a valid carbon while he has chametz. Amalei Abaya says, "Nehida itchilei mi pesach." No, it's true that when he makes a mum in it, it's no longer able to be brought as the actual carbon pesach. B'dvei pesach mi yitchi. Even though it has a mum, he still has to sell it and use that money to buy a pesach. So it still has a shaved pesach on it. So you can't say it became a shlomim and now it's a kosher shlomim being brought. When he finishes, until that point, it still remains a pesach, and a pesach af shaloi bezmani is possible, and therefore he's not going to be chayiv for bringing his pesach while he has chametz. How can you say when it has a mum that it's going to be able to be used as demei pesach? But he already shechted this animal. He shechted it, so you didn't have a chance to bring it over to the bezdin to stand it up in front of them and have them estimate its value, which is one of the requirements for being paid your carbon pesach. So how can you say that the May Pesach, it's still a Pesach, but it's not feasible to do the process for being paid to this carbon Pesach? But if you shafted two simonim or even roiv of the two simonim and it's still jumping around, it's considered to be alive, and you can't, and therefore you're not able to check it. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. We're saying no. Even though right. You say if you're going to taina that it's boy hamad aracha, this is not true because we're saying shachar b'shnayim or roiv shnayim. If you shechted, even if it's patchking around, even if it's still running around like it's alive, and even though it's going to die because you shechted both the simonim, it's still considered to have its live that you can that you could do hamad of a haracha, in spite of the fact it's not practically possible, but it's treated as chai l'chol dvorah that you could theoretically do it, and therefore it should remain a pesach. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, hashoichet b'shnayim v'shloisha mekaymes, someone who shechts a animal within 2 or 3 places. Shchitasek shera. The shchita is kosher. It means he cut it in 2 or 3. He made 2 or 3 cuts. Ke'amrisa kamei d'shmuel. That means one. Let's say the first 2 cuts were not not through rive of the sim, and then he does the third one. He does all the way through. Ke'amrisa kamei d'shmuel amali yinu shchita mufaras v'leka. He says no, that's not going to be a good shchita because you need a shchita that's obvious, that's evident, and if you have a bunch of cuts, it's impossible to tell which is the valid cut that went all the way through. You need a clear cut. If you have a bunch of cuts and some of them are less than the shear, those less than the shear ones will make it impossible to see. They'll open up, and therefore that will close up the one that's deeper, and you won't be able to clearly see that this one goes all the way through. But for us, Rav Shimon ben Lakish also agrees. The Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish, minayin l'shchita she'im b'feras. How do you know that the shchita has to be clearly through the simon? Shenemar chet shachat l'shayim mir medavar, like a chet shachat, like a arrow that shechts or an arrow that goes through. L'shayim mir medavar. Their tongue is merama. They lie with their speech. So it means like a chetz, like a. But the point is, we're comparing a arrow piercing to someone speaking lies. But the point, we call it chetz shachat, we call shchita like an arrow. An arrow is very clear. When you shoot an arrow, you see where it goes. So too, your shchita has to be clear. It has to be clear that this is the cut. Motzei Rebbe Loza. Beis, this is going to be the next Mishnah. Beis, on the next Amud. Beis oichsim besaken. 2 people are holding on to a knife. B'sheichten, and they shecht. Afilu echad milamayla ve'echad milamata, shchitazak shera. Even if one does so at this point we understand that the 2 people are not holding on to the same sakin. They're each holding a sakin, and one makes a cut on top, meaning closer to the head of the animal. Ve'echad makes one's lamata closer to the body of the animal. Shchitazak shera. Amay v'aleka shchita meferas. Since there's 2 cuts, it's not clear which is the one that went through the siman. Says no, it's talking about where 2 people are holding on to the same knife. What about that which it says about it, that the Brisa says on it, the chiddush of this, that it's going to be a good shchita, it's that one is going to make the other one treif. If we're talking about 2 knives with 2 people, if it's talking about 2 separate knives, you can understand why we're saying a chiddush that it's not going to make it a treifa, because one might think, since they're doing it separately, they're not going to be so careful. One's going to cut through like a third of the way, the other one's going to cut through a third by his simon. They're each going to assume the other one went through the whole simon, and neither of them will cut a full simon. So that's what coming to tell you, no, it's not a problem. If they're both holding on to the same akin, what is it? It says that we're not choishes. The chiddush is we're not choishes that they're going to allow each one to make it a treifa by not finishing. The problem over there, if they're both holding on to the same sakin, is that maybe because there's 2 people holding on, they won't do a smooth slicing like you're required to do, but rather they'll do a drisa, which is pushing with the knife instead of slicing. So that's why we're concerned that. So how could you say Shema? So the lashon, if that's what the case that we're talking about, that we're talking about 2 people are holding on to the same knife, it shouldn't be Shema Yitrafu, it should be Shema Yidrasu, because that would be the chashash. Amalei Ravavin, Tani and Chayshin, Shema Yidrashu Zelza. In a Chanami, you change the lashon to Yidrasu instead of Yishchatu. Motzei Rabban. Shochet es haveshet lamata. That's a kana lamayla, which is going to be, I think, where is this? It's a brisa, yeah. It's not the Mishnah. If he shechted the veshet on bottom and he did the kana higher up, meaning the veshet he cut closer to the body, and the kana he did lamaila by the head. Oyes haveshet lamaila was a kana lamato, or vice versa. Shchitazak shera. It's still shech, kosher. Amai v'aleka shchita mefayras. If it's going to be two separate cuts, one higher up for the veshet and one bar down for the kana, so it's not going to be clear. Like we said, whenever you have conflicting, our question was whenever you have conflicting or multiple cuts, the view of the cuts is obscured because the other cut opens up and makes this one close up. No, we're not talking about where it's two separate cuts. It's one cut that's slanted like a pen. When you write with a pen, your pen is slanted. This cut was also slanted, so it went like from the bottom to the top, but it was all one cut. There was one cow that was shechted with 2 and 3 places. He took from the best pieces of this. So you see from here the Mishnah that we were matcha to say that it's talking about one sack and that was held by 2 people. It's really talking about 2 people because we don't hold like this sack that we just said that you need a shchita mefayras. He's passing it's not necessary. Amri v'damarav. Hiklet is a sakin bein simin with simin. If he stuck in the knife between the 2 simonim, upasku, Rashi says that means he stuck it in between the 2 simonim, and he went down and he cut the bottom simin, and then he went to the top and he cut the other simin. That means he did both of them with slicing in a downward motion, the proper way. It's still psula because he was machlid. By sticking the knife in between, that's choylada, which is one of the psulim of a shchita. Tachas ha'ar, kshera, mai. What,
So you can order.
What has happened? If he did,
What?
I'm sorry, tachas ha'ar kshera, but if he does it underneath the skin, it's kosher. My kamashmon, what does he have to tell you this for? Tnina. We said already that if he stuck the knife under the second siman and he cut it, it's Rabbi Shaiv says it's a nevela because the shchita is possible. Rabbi Kiva says when you do a shchita with chaylada with one of these psulim, it doesn't make it into nevela, it makes it into a treifa. But we're agreeing in any case that doing such a shchita is going to pass it. So what do I need to say that over here? Maybe over there, by that mission of the Machlekes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shaiv, that's talking about where he went from, where he went the wrong way. He was going from down to up. Our mission was talking about milamayla mata. So I might say, that's why over there they say it's possible. Which is which is our case. So we said if you do it under the skin, it's kosher. Rav Amar tachas ar any idea. But Rav said he's not sure if it's kosher. He says that underneath the skin, if that's going to be chaylad, if you stuck the knife under the skin and then push down, tachas batlis mao. What happens if he does it under a cloth? Is that also considered chaylada, sticking the knife in and then pushing it? Tachas samer mesubach, or underneath the wool of the animal. He stucks it underneath the wool. Instead of cutting straight, he stuck it under the wool and then cut. Mao. Teku. Boira papa. Hichlid b'miyat simanim mao. He said, what happens if you did chaylada, where he did first he cut most of the siman. He did the roiv siman, which is a kosher shchita, and then he stuck the he took I guess he took the knife out and then stuck it back in and did the miyat simon. Mao, is that going to also be considered chaylada? It's like Gemara, teku. We'll leave it as a question. Yeah, I'll leave it over here.